Hey gang, I wanted to thank you all for such a great conversation on feedback and constructive feedback and how we respond to feedback and how we give feedback. You were super engaged last week as a class and I really appreciate that. See what I'm doing here? Funny how that works, isn't it? Many of our classes are very much a meta analysis and experiment, if you will, in practicing what we preach, practicing what we teach you in classes, whether it's applying theory or applying best practices. So I want to recap some of the conversation from last week, and some of the concerns that we had included etiquette and order of operation, if you will, or a formula for feedback. We can easily point to examples like the compliment sandwich, where the redirect is provided in the middle, and arguably there's research that counters that particular practice. Then again, we can always find research to counter just about anything we want to look at. But still, there's a bit of stress that comes with the idea of, am I going to get this wrong? And it's a challenge that we have to overcome. But then some other concerns addressed subjectivity and how do we overcome the feeling of subjectivity when we're receiving feedback from somebody that we disagree with, or skepticism in feedback, or skepticism based off of the person who's giving feedback, which kind of comes back to the conversation that was later in the week regarding familiarity with the person giving feedback or receiving feedback, and even positions of power and how does that play out differently with our feedback. There are a couple of things that I noticed as well that I thought were interesting that haven't come out in this discussion in semesters past. That was the idea of perspective and even growth mindset, how we can use these areas to empower us in both giving and receiving feedback. But then some other tiny little suggestions that came out. Tammy talked about the idea of phrasing and the words that we choose. It's a difference between saying, this is wrong, you should do it this way, versus saying, well, this is interesting, I like the color here, but this color gets lost. You've said the same thing in a different way. So look at the phrasing when we're giving our feedback, which kind of leads into supporting comments. And I think this came from Nicole, and I believe Jacob even followed up on it a little bit. But it reminded me of what I do when I'm giving feedback to students on papers. When I am correcting grammar or when I'm correcting passive voice or phrasing, some of you have encountered this because you've taken a class from me where I require a paper. They're rare, believe it or not, they are out there. I typically teach them in the summertime. But when I'm correcting a particular issue, whether it's serial commas or Americanized versus British spellings, I usually try to go find a URL reference to show you who says that's a good practice. And it's not just me making this up. Somebody else out there agrees with me. So providing that supporting detail. Even if we're talking about our two colors complementary, again, the person receiving the feedback may not be receptive to that, but at least you've tried to provide a justification that is objective as to why you made that comment. But then the last thing I kind of want to talk about is this difference between general performance feedback and design feedback. Because we can talk about workplace performance and what that feedback looks like versus actually designing something and getting feedback from a peer or a client. Hopefully, between the resources last week and the experiences you will have through this semester, the way that I've structured them, because as a former boss of mine would say, hope is not a method, I do actually have a scaffold in place to help maintain objectivity in your feedback as designers. So I want you to keep that in mind as we go through this semester. Now let's turn to this week's topic. Please use the links on screen to navigate to the section of the overview you wish to access.